South Africa is launching the B20 summit in Cape Town today, and the summit brings together business representatives from the G20 countries, selected invited countries and international organizations to discuss economic and business-related issues. For more on this now, let's cross live to SABC News Reporter Nosipho Radebe, who's joining us for this conversation. Nosipho, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. As those business leaders from G20 member countries and those who are invited, meet, definitely there are issues of the global economy. There's issues of trade that are possibly going to feature high on the agenda.
Yeah, certainly, Bongiwe, and good afternoon to you too as well, and the viewers there at home. Definitely issues around global cooperation, definitely high on the B20 list as we come to you live from Century City here in Cape Town. But the B20 theme, of course, that sub-forum of the G20, that theme of inclusive growth, shared prosperity, as well as global cooperation. But they have their own priorities, and they also want to ensure that the recommendations that they put forward are implemented when we see that November summit convene, of course, later this year. But just to give us a sort of glimpse into the highlights from today, I'm going to be joined now by the B20 Sherpa, Cass Kuvadia. Cass, a very good day, and of course, thank you for your time today. As I mentioned, that push here from the B20 for to see the implementation of recommendations. Talk to us about, how concerning that is for you as a B20.
Yeah, so B20 represents business and is an opportunity for businesses in the G20 countries to make policy recommendations to the governments. Given that these are recommendations coming from business, we want to see, and I think we have a responsibility as a host for the B20, to show business organizations and businesses that recommendations they make are implemented and that they are trackable, and that if we find over either the next host period or the period after that, we find that recommendations have not been implemented, we need to ask why and we need to follow up. So Brazil actually raised this with us when we were there last year, and we agree with them that we need to have recommendations that do have action items. We'd like to then, in the recommendations we make, also suggest where those recommendations should be implemented and who by, whether it's by a multilateral organization, whether it's by a government, whether it's by a business organization in a G20 country. We're talking to our counterparts in the US, to whom we hand over, the American Chamber of Commerce in Washington, to whom we hand over later this year. And they are quite keen on also tracking this and talking to whoever takes over in 2027 to then establish a sort of pattern of implementable recommendations and tracking them, and then picking up with governments why they're not happening, if they are not happening. So we're quite keen on doing that. We've emphasized that, and we will conduct the discussion in the task forces in a way that we come out with a limited set of recommendations, but identifying clear, implementable, and actionable items.
In light of that, Cass, of course, this B20 sort of engagement group comes at a time where there is that global and geopolitical economic fragmentation. In terms of, that's obviously a concern for the G20, but how far does that extend then to the B20?
Well, look, at the B20, we don't want to get involved in, and we shouldn't get involved in, the political discussions around the global dynamics at the moment. But I think that we cannot ignore it. We cannot ignore the fact that there are countries to the north, including the US, that are becoming increasingly protectionist in the way they're running their economies. And that obviously has an impact on countries in the south. We have, I think, a responsibility, given that we're the fourth country in the south to consecutively host the B20. We have a responsibility to put the priorities of the south on the table. And I think it's not just the south. Some of the noises coming out of the US also have an impact on countries in the north, in Europe and elsewhere. So I think that countries in the north and countries in the south have something in common as a result of some of the positions being taken by the U.S. administration. And so if the politics goes in a direction that makes it difficult to create an environment for businesses to do business, then we've got to say something about it. And we've got to say something about it in the recommendations we make to the G20 governments. But we'll see how that goes during the course of the year. And if we do need to include in our recommendations our concerns about the way politics are going, then we will do so.
And just finally, just your reflections then on the issue around global tariffs as a B20, that could affect business in terms of inflation. Any reflections from you?
To have a tit-for-tat on tariffs is just a vicious cycle downwards. I don't think it's the right route to go. I mean, the current U.S. administration is quite clear that they are using tariffs as a tool to essentially force companies to manufacture in the U.S. and to serve the U.S. market, and those companies would be punished if they're manufacturing elsewhere and exporting to the U.S. We don't think that that's the way to conduct economies. We think that flies in the face of globalization, that flies in the face of multilateralism, and what we should be talking about, U.S. and others, what we should be talking about is how do we, as economies in the world, collaborate through multilateral institutions to build our economies in a way that actually addresses poverty, that includes people, that addresses unemployment and so on. And that's where the debate should be happening.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, Cass. Thank you so much. Of course, that was B20 Sherpa Cass Kuvadia just outlining there the priorities of the B20 engagement group. And of course, I'm going to hand over to you back in studio, Bongiwe.
Thank you very much, Nosipho, for wrapping that for us and just giving us a sense of what's likely to top the agenda. That's my colleague there, Nosipho Radebe, live for us at the B20 Summit.